back to the Allegheny Northern in N scale, and today we are talking about trees, and more specifically how I do trees here on the Allegheny Northern. And so for those of you who have followed the railroad or who at least have seen some of the previews, you know that I model autumn and winter on my layout, and those are two very different trees. One is very colorful and one is very, well, not. And I decided to do this video because I don't see folks do autumn very often on their layout, and I don't know why. It's a great season to model, but it is a little bit challenging. So before we get into it, I want to show you some of the products that we'll be using. And first of all, we have a couple of different colors of Super Leaf. This is from Scenic Express, and this is really nice material. We've got a couple of different colors, so you're going to see some different yellows, you're going to see some different greens and whatnot. So just, I'm giving you a sampling here of what we're going to be using. And then we have a nice accent color here, which is a turf, but it's by Bachman, and it is a late fall. And this I'm going to use sparingly, but it does make a very nice color and a very convincing color for autumn. Now, autumn is one of those seasons that, you know, when you see it in a book or you see pictures of it, you see these bright, brilliant colors. And for those of you who experience it, you can kind of laugh because you know that is maybe a week looks like that out of the entirety of autumn. Maybe a week looks like that. And even still, it doesn't look necessarily as nice as a, you know, color corrected photo. But autumn looks a lot more brown than what you typically see, and this is a pretty good idea of what autumn looks like here. So this is a tree that's already done, obviously, but this is the color of autumn. Those bright reds and yellows that you see, they happen. Don't get me wrong; they're real, but it is not the. That's not the way it really looks. And so here's some actual photographs of real autumn. Okay, and so why do I bring that up? Now, it's not to dash your hopes and dreams of seeing a colorful autumn. It is because when you see it in model form, it doesn't look correct. And it looks toyish because the colors are so bright and so brilliant, and it's just not the way it is. So I want to show you how I do my trees, and that maybe help you to do yours as well. Now, it doesn't necessarily, this doesn't just apply to autumn. This can be for really any season or any color tree. There's a couple of principles that will be uniform throughout any tree that you do. So let's start off with let's start off with the basics here. So for the basics, we have our super trees. There are other tree materials out there, but I'll be honest with you, nothing really compares to the super trees, especially in N scale. And because N scale is so small, you get a lot of trees out of a box. So once you break off the pieces from I'll call it the main stems, and you get your tree-shaped trees, I like to keep them off to the side, and they are, you know, they're kind of light colored. So what I do is I soak them in a vat of inks, and that's also not only just inks and water, but it's also the matte medium. And the matte medium is important because that is how we are going to get our super leaves to stick to it. So it's just a matter of dropping it in there and letting it soak. It's porous, so the matte will help seal it up, and also help the material stick to it. And then also, now that I've got the stain in here, it's also going to pick up that color. So that is just an acrylic ink that I'm using in there. So it's nothing special. And then the next step that I'm going to do here is I'm going to just move these trees out of here because they're in the way. And I'm going to select my leaf colors. And the first one that we're going to do here is going to be sort of a more light, early fall kind of color. So it's going to have some green on it. And what you want to do is you want to shake off as much of that mat as you can. You don't really want it dripping all over the place. And then just go ahead and take your shaker, and from the top, holding it like this, just go ahead and sprinkle it onto your tree. And so there's my green color. Shake off anything that's loose. And then I also want to hit this with just a little bit of yellow. And we're going to repeat that process here. And of course, I'm doing this over a bin so that everything that drops I can reuse. Okay, after we're done there, we give that a nice shake. And then this needs to go into a something to dry. It should be sitting upright. At least that's how I do mine. And then when it dries, it'll have a nice tree shape to it, and then everything that is not stuck by the matte medium will fall off. The tinting is up to you. I've got trees that are tinted with the ink and some that are not. It doesn't really matter which way you do it. The lighter color does work. I just prefer to darken it, having both on my layout. It just looks better. Okay, for me, I prefer to let my trees sit in a piece of styrofoam, and just like this, and then they dry, and everything looks wonderful. And so there's some trees that I did yesterday, and what I like to do is I kind of like to group them by their colors. So those ones were more of a green and yellow, and then if I give me a second here, I will grab these. These are more of the brown sort of color, but you get the idea here, and what they look like when they're done, and how they dry. Now, so now that you've made the trees, you've got to plant these trees, right? So you've got to get them on the layout, and because it's a natural product, you get some funky shapes, and you need to know how to work with those funky shapes, because certain trees may look like garbage, but they might actually be very, very usable, and you just need to know how to place them. But then more importantly, it's about the colors that you're placing. So it's not just a matter of grabbing trees and slapping them on the hillside. You've got to look at your color arrangement. And when you look at your layout from a distance, you should almost see kind of a uniform color. So the hills will either be very yellow and green, or they'll be very orange and brown, but you won't see these bright, brilliant colors all over the place. That's just not how autumn looks. And so I go back to those pictures that I took. They're not photo corrected, color corrected. They are just autumn in all of its natural glory. That is the look that you are going for here on your layout. You want it to look real. You don't want it necessarily to look picturesque, because that's not how you would view it in real life. Okay, so making the trees is actually the easiest part of the tree process. Now, for me, I hate making trees. And I know a lot of people like that, and they go, "Oh, I like making trees." I hate making trees. Here's why I hate making trees. So it's very repetitious, and you pick out your trees, you soak your trees, you flock them with your leaves, and then you plant them, a day later or so. And you have all these trees. You've made, what seems like trees for days and days and days, and then you get to the layout and it covers this tiny little area. And you're like, okay, well, I just spent all this time and I made all these trees and it got me nowhere. So trees take a lot of time. But now that we are at the layout and we've got to discuss actually planting these trees onto the layout, there are some things to, discuss as far as what our hillside looks like. So take you back to the beginning of the video. If you forgot, go ahead back and look at what those real life hillsides look like with trees. And yes, you can, if you look at the pictures, you see the trees, and they kind of blends all into one sort of like a Monet type painting of the tree line. You don't really see the trees, you just kind of see shades of color, and it's very impressionistic, especially on a very overcast rainy fall day. You just don't get that vibrant color. Now what we're going to do is we are going to next look at our trees, and we want to put like trees together, and we want to put the best of those trees in the front. So here I have some Woodland Scenics, the standard trees you can buy already built, and they are in the background because they don't look like good trees. They just look like they're great fillers. Okay, so if you have a dense scene and you need to take up some space and you don't want to waste it all, with relatively expensive super trees, you don't need to. You can use this clump foliage on the Woodland Scenics armatures and get a very nice result. So, but what I'm going to do is we're going to start with this kind of orangey looking tree here. And so it's, planting the trees is nothing real exciting. Just going to make a nice hole in the foam base. And I know this is foam back here, so I have a tool appropriate for that. If you were drilling it into something harder, you would actually probably need a drill. But just go ahead and plant your tree. Now, this is where the challenge comes in. I know everyone's looking at that tree and it's kind of leaning. Don't worry. Don't pay attention to that. It's not going to be important here in a second. We want to get some variation in the color because there is some variation in those, in the natural fall foliage, but we also want to kind of keep the colors in the same family. So we want to keep oranges and oranges together, okay? We want to keep yellows and yellows together. And we want to mix in a little bit of green in there just to sort of break up some of that monotony, I guess. But that is kind of where you got to be careful because that monotony is realistic. So we don't want to make it so monotonous as to be like, well, that's really boring. But we don't want it to be so colorful that it's unbelievable. And so I like to try to, and you're noticing that I'm not putting glue down, right? I'm not gluing these trees in, and there's a reason for that. And that's because after I plant my trees and I live with them for a little while, I like to see what the hillside looks like. And at the end of the day, if I don't like it, I want to be able to pull those trees up, pull them out, and get them out of there and replace them with another set of trees that maybe the coloring looks a little bit better. So I don't glue them in right away. The problem with that is sometimes I forget to go back and actually glue them in at all, and so I end up with unglued trees. And you'll notice them leaning in some of my videos, and then I eventually go back and I fix them. But that's just one of those things. But I don't like to glue them in right away because I want to see what they look like. And I want to kind of get an impression of the hillside as to what the hillside looks like. And, maybe I'm spending a little bit too much time and putting a little bit too much thought into this process. But I look at it as if you don't put enough thought into it, then you get a hillside that doesn't look convincing. Now, all right, so I've established my orange color here, right? So we're going with an orange. Now I'm going to just mix it up a little tiny bit, and I'm going to plant a tree that's kind of orange and yellow. And the reason I want to do that is, where did I put that hole? The reason I want to do that is because I want to introduce some variation without making it look funky, right? So I still, when you look at that hillside, let's go ahead and zoom in here. Let's look at that hillside. You still have a general theme, like those colors are all together. You don't have, you don't have like, oh, there's this random like super red tree sticking out. There's this random super yellow or orange tree sticking out. They're all sort of blending in together, and that's what you want for the hillside. Okay, so this is kind of where I'm at right now. I've got a few more trees that I'm going to plant on this hillside before I call it done, but I want to just kind of give you an idea. So when you look back there, what you see in general is you see in the background here, you see that we've got, it's a very orange. It's not all orange. Like there's other colors mixed in there, and you see that the deeper colors, that are in the sort of in the center there kind of bring out those shadows. And then here in the front, I've gone with a totally different set of trees, right? They're a little bit smaller and they're greener and they're yellower. So what I want to convey is that those trees are different than those trees up there on the hillside, right? So I've got two different trees going on here. And I want you to see that difference because that's how they would grow in the wild. And you would certainly have some of these trees and those trees. Eventually they would cross, but a lot of times trees take different types of soil and they actually fight for territory. So, only certain trees will grow with other trees. So, that's not a bad break. But when you take a step back and you look at that hillside, you get the idea that there's a general color. That's an overall arching theme, and it's not that there are some trees that stick out versus some trees that don't stick out. They all kind of sort of blend together, and that is how you want to do your fall season. Now, let me take you down here, and I'm going to show you a scene that's already been completed. It's been done for a while, and show you what I mean here. Okay, so we're on the back side here of the roundhouse, and this is the tree line that you're seeing. So you can see that we're going with a little bit more of a yellow look down here, and that's just because that's what I wanted this to look like. And so as you look back there, you can see that none of these trees are really sticking out as, any wild color. You've got a few there in the back. They're a little bit darker, but the whole hillside blends together. And that's what I'm trying to convey, so that as you look at the entire layout and as you get a more aerial view of things, you can see that for the most part, the hills sort of all just kind of blend together, and that ultimately is what you want when you're doing your hillside. It's the same thing when you do green trees, for spring or fall or summer, but it's easier with green because you add a little bit of green, a little bit of brown, some different lights and darks, and you pretty much have it. When you do autumn, now you've got to mess with it just a little tiny bit because you've got some different colors, that are slightly different, and they can't all necessarily, it's not just green. You've got other colors, and so if you go too far in any one direction, then the hillside doesn't quite look right. And so if there's any variation, which like you can see like that red tree sort of in the back, there's a little, it stands out among those colors because for the most part it's all muted. And then you've got those two pine trees there, right? And they're very green, and so they stand out. So you're going to have those trees that stand out, but in general, you want all of these muted tones to sort of mix together, and you want all of these colors to sort of blend into one giant, image. And that's what you want to do. So, okay, now, let's say you ran out and you bought the Woodland Scenics already made trees, and you're looking at that going, shit, you're right. I don't want it to look like a toy train set like these trees do. What do I do with these trees? I already bought them. Don't worry, you can still use them. And let me show you some areas where I have used them and they work convincingly. Okay, here's a scene that could use some tree updating. And what you're looking at is you're seeing a mix of super trees and Woodland Scenics trees. But what you'll notice is some of those Woodland Scenics trees have some additional flocking colors added to them. So if you already have the Woodland Scenics, I'm going to call them clump trees. I don't know what else they would be called, but the clumpy trees, you can jazz them up a little bit. You can use an airbrush. You can add some color. You can dull the colors down. You can mix them. But in general, what you want to do is you want to go for that, that overall, you want to kind of blend all those colors in. You want an overarching color. So either pick your oranges, pick your reds, pick your yellows, whatever one you want, and you can kind of blend it together. So this scene here for me is not as convincing as the one we just built. So, this needs some work because when you look at it, you've got these yellows that stick out. Then you've got some oranges that are kind of muted with the browns. That's not terrible. But then you've got real green trees. And so this doesn't set a very realistic scene for me. So, that is on the chopping block to get redone. It's finished right, as far as I'm concerned right now, so I'm leaving it. But it needs redone. Those clump trees need to be mixed up a little bit better, and there needs to be some more of the super trees in there to sort of spread it out a little bit. And I know you're saying, okay, well, all you've been doing is talking about super trees. I don't have you know super trees. Okay, I understand. Then you can use the woodland scenics trees, but instead of just going right with the clump, use their lichens and use some different. You can get a better looking tree, but it's going to look fuller. Okay, so you're not going to be able to see through the tree like you would naturally. So that's the offset. That's the trade. Okay, if you're going to stay with woodland scenics products, or you can do a hybrid. Okay, so if you do a hybrid, you're going to get something that looks like this. I do have a video that shows you what this looks like, how I did this. But this is the hybrid. So this is both a Woodland Scenics armature, but it's also got a super tree, like the leftover parts and pieces put on it, and then those are covered with the fine leaf foliage. So you can do a hybrid if you want that Woodland Scenics armature. And so I bought some armatures just to try this out to see if it works, and it does. So these trees are kind of big and they're kind of bulky, but if you put some, that hillside's not quite done. It looks very barren, right? So, but if you put some Woodland Scenics, or I'm sorry, some Scenic Express super trees in there with that, now all of a sudden that forest is going to look really, really alive. So that's kind of, what we're looking at, as far as trying to find the happy medium between the two. I just don't feel that Woodland Scenics, they make these small little packages where you can get some of their fine leaf foliage. Price wise, you're better off with Scenic Express. Woodland Scenics is just way too expensive. They don't have this down right. One of the very few times where I will not recommend Woodland Scenics is their trees. In fact, trees are probably the only product of theirs that I will, it's not my favorite. That's where I go with Scenic Express. So, but anyway, so there's an option for you. Like I said, I do have a video of me doing these as a trial and error, just so you can see what it's like. Okay, so that is the video for this week, and that is making autumn trees. And like I said, there's a lot of different ways to do it. You can go with the Woodland Scenic stuff if you want. Scenic Express is my favorite. You can get them already built, or you can make them yourselves. It doesn't matter which option you choose. They all work. But the idea is pay attention to the colors that you see. Try to find some real photos taken from some real locations that are not all color corrected and fancied up, because you're going to be disappointed with that when you see your layout and it looks so bright and shiny, and then you see an actual autumn and it's like, it doesn't look like that at all. So it bothers me when I see layouts that look very, very clean and very neat and all the colors are very brilliant, because that really adds a toy-like quality to the layout, which is why I'm slowly detailing locomotives and rolling stock and weathering them. Trees are the same way. Even if you're all in green, all green trees that are very bright, brilliant green, that are like, this is the dead of summer and everything is just very lush, you still have color variation that you need to make sure that you pay attention to. Otherwise, it's not going to be convincing and it's going to look fake. So make sure you vary your colors. Make sure you vary your underbrush. And then don't be afraid. You'll notice that I have some dry fall and some dead leaf around my trees. That's when leaves start turning colors, they start falling off almost immediately. And so you're going to have some dead leaves around the tree that you need to model. And it kind of makes a little bit of a ring, if you don't get a big storm that blows them all away. And so you end up with kind of a little tree ring down below with these leaves. And so if you have a lot of trees together, you're going to see, it's just going to be littered with material. And if it's a single tree or a landscaped area, then it's going to, it might be a little more kind of on its own with a little tree ring around it. But in any event, that's how you're going to want to model your foliage. And I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe on your way out.